Listen closely. Every yes you force becomes a silent no to your own well-being. Every time you allow disrespect, you teach your mind that pain is normal. Every time you stay in chaos, your nervous system learns to call chaos home. And that is how people lose themselves. Not all at once, but in small compromises they kept calling being nice. But today, that cycle ends. But because you become stronger in your decisions, you will no longer abandon your peace just to avoid disappointing others. Because here is a truth many people learn too late. If you don't protect your mind will eventually turn against you. You choose silence over arguments that drain you. You choose distance over relationships that confuse your peace. You choose rest without guilt. You choose no without explanation. You choose yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. Because healing does not begin when everything around you changes. Healing begins when you finally stop abandoning yourself. And from this moment on, your peace is no longer negotiable. Your boundaries are no longer optional. It is something you protect, like your life depends on it. Because it does. 1 non-negotiable boundaries you must set today. 1. Stop allowing disrespect. Listen closely. Disrespect is never accidental when it becomes consistent. It is a pattern, a message, a decision from the other person. If someone constantly ignores your feelings, if they speak down to you, mock your voice, dismiss your thoughts, or make you feel less than, that is not love. That is not friendship. That is emotional erosion happening slowly, repeatedly, quietly. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't always look violent, it often looks normal. But it is still damage. Because every time you tolerate disrespect, you are not just being understanding. You are being trained to accept less than you deserve. Respect is not something you beg for. It is not something you prove your worth for. Respect is a standard, a requirement, a boundary that protects your identity. And here is the truth many people only realize after years of pain. The moment you accept disrespect without correction, you are teaching people exactly how to treat you. So today, you decide. Not again. Not anymore. Not ever at the cost of your dignity. 2. Stop over-explaining yourself. You are not on trial. You don't need to defend your existence, your choices, or your boundaries to people who are not responsible for your life. But listen carefully. Over-explaining is not communication. It is often self-doubt disguised as clarity. The more you explain what does not need explanation, the more you unconsciously ask for permission to live your own life. And slowly, you lose authority over your own decisions. You begin to sound unsure about things you already know are right for you. But hear this clearly. You do not need to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. No is not rude. It is complete. It is whole. It is powerful. I can't is enough. I won't is valid. I choose not to is final. You are not required to turn your peace into a courtroom argument. Because every time you over-explain, you shrink your boundary just a little bit more. And one day, you realize you are exhausted. Not from life itself, but from constantly defending it. So today, you choose simplicity over explanation, peace over permission, and clarity over approval. 3. Protect your peace at all costs. Your peace is not just comfort. It is your mental wealth. It is the silent foundation your life is built on. And anything that repeatedly disturbs it is not just life. It is a threat to your stability. Listen carefully. Drama that never ends. Gossip that poisons your thoughts. Toxic conversations that leave you drained. Emotional manipulation that confuses your reality. Negativity that lingers long after the conversation ends. All of it has a cost, and the cost is your inner peace. But here is what most people don't realize. Peace doesn't disappear suddenly. It is slowly exchanged for what you keep tolerating. So every time you entertain chaos, you are paying for it with your mental calm. Because peace is not something you find once and keep forever. Peace is something you must actively guard. Every day, every interaction, every decision. And what you refuse to protect, you will eventually lose without even noticing. 4. Stop being available for everyone. You are not a public resource. You are not an emotional emergency line. You are not meant to be accessible at the expense of your own well-being. But somewhere along the way, you started responding to everyone instantly. You started saying yes when you were already overwhelmed. You started giving energy you didn't have. And slowly, something changed. People began to expect your availability instead of appreciating your presence. Listen closely. Being constantly available does not make you valuable. It makes you vulnerable to being taken for granted. Because people rarely question what is always accessible. And here is the hard truth. Not everyone deserves immediate access to your time, your energy, or your attention. Some people deserve distance. Some conversations deserve delay. And some calls don't need to be answered right away. Silence is not rudeness. Sometimes silence is self-respect finally speaking. Because when you stop being constantly available, you start becoming consciously valuable again. 5. Walk away from what hurts you. Pain is not proof that you should stay. It is often proof that you need to leave. But many people confuse endurance with loyalty. They think, if I stay long enough, it will change. If I love harder, it will heal. If I tolerate more, it will improve. But listen carefully. Not everything that hurts you is meant to teach you patience. Some things are meant to teach you exit. If something consistently drains your joy, if it breaks your confidence, if it makes you question your worth, if it keeps reopening wounds that should have healed, then it is not aligned with your life. Because staying in something that destroys you slowly is not loyalty. It is self-abandonment in disguise. And the hardest truth is this: you don't heal in the same environment that keeps injuring you. So sometimes healing begins the moment you decide, this is where I stop losing myself. 6. Stop ignoring your feelings. Your feelings are not random. They are not exaggerations. They are not weaknesses. They are signals. That heaviness in your chest, that sudden anxiety you keep brushing off, that sadness you hide behind "I'm fine," that emptiness you pretend not to notice. They are all trying to tell you something. But many people have been taught to silence their emotions instead of listening to them. So they say, "It's nothing. I'm overreacting. I'll be fine." But the body remembers what the mind ignores. Because emotions don't disappear when ignored. They accumulate, and what you refuse to acknowledge emotionally will eventually show up physically, mentally, or both. Listen closely. Your feelings are not enemies. They are early warnings. They are your inner truth trying to reach you before things break down. So, instead of suppressing them, you start asking, what is this feeling trying to protect me from? Because healing begins the moment you stop abandoning your emotions and start listening to them like they matter. 7. Choose yourself even when it's hard. Self-choice is not selfish. It is survival. It is the moment you stop betraying yourself just to be accepted by others. Because somewhere along the way, many people were taught that choosing others first makes them good. But no one told them what it costs when you never choose yourself. Listen closely. Choosing yourself will not always feel comfortable. In fact, it will often feel like loss before it feels like freedom. It may cost you relationships you thought would last forever, comfort zones that felt familiar but were quietly hurting you, environments where you were accepted, but not truly valued, temporary approval from people who only loved a version of you that didn't. Challenge them. And yes, it will hurt, because every time you choose yourself, you are breaking an old version of you that survived by pleasing others. But here's the truth that changes everything. The price of choosing others over yourself is far greater than any loss you face when you choose yourself. Because when you consistently abandon your own needs, you don't just lose people, you lose pieces of yourself. You begin to forget what you like. You stop recognizing your voice. You start living as a supporting character in your own life. And one day you wake up surrounded by people, but empty within yourself. So choosing yourself, even when it's hard, is not just a decision. It is a return to your identity, a return to your peace, a return to your life. 8. Stop explaining your boundaries. Listen carefully. A boundary is not a discussion. It is not a negotiation. It is not a group decision. It is a declaration of self-respect. But many people make the mistake of over-explaining their boundaries, hoping others will understand, accept, or approve them. But here is what you must realize. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always try to debate them. They will question you. They will guilt you. They will ask for exceptions. They will try to convince you that your boundary is too much. But it is not about misunderstanding. It is about discomfort, because your boundary disrupts what they used to have access to. And that is why clarity is more powerful than explanation. You don't need a long speech to justify protecting your peace. You don't need emotional essays to defend your limits. You don't need permission to say no. A boundary is simply this. This is what I will no longer tolerate. No apology, no over-explanation, no negotiation. Because the moment you start defending your boundary too much, you begin weakening it. And a weak boundary is not a boundary. It is an invitation to be crossed again. So stand firm. Say it once. Mean it fully. And let your consistency speak louder than your words. 9. Stop holding on to people who let you go emotionally. This is one of the quietest forms of pain. Because not all abandonment is loud. Some of it is subtle, invisible, unspoken. Not everyone who stays in your life is truly present in your life. Some people are physically there, but emotionally gone. They no longer check on you. They no longer care deeply. They no longer invest energy into you. They are there out of habit, not heart. And that creates confusion, because your body still sees them, but your soul no longer feels them. So you start trying harder. You start reaching out more. You start overgiving just to feel the connection again. But listen carefully. You cannot force emotional presence from someone who has already checked out. And the most painful trap is this. You keep holding on, hoping they will return to how they used to be. But you are not dealing with who they were. You are dealing with who they have become. Letting go is painful. Yes, but clinging to someone who has already let you go emotionally is a deeper, quieter form of suffering. Because you are constantly pouring into a connection that is no longer pouring back into you. So the boundary becomes this. Stop chasing people who stop choosing you. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Because love should not feel like begging for attention from someone who once gave it freely. 10. Stop abandoning yourself to be loved. This is the deepest boundary of all, because this is where many people lose themselves without even realizing it. They think love requires shrinking. They think love requires silence. They think love requires over-giving, over-apologizing, over-understanding, over-sacrificing. So they become smaller, quieter, easier, less demanding, less expressive, just to be chosen. But listen carefully. If love requires you to disappear, it is not love. It is control disguised as affection. It is attachment that only exists when you are convenient. Because real love does not demand self-destruction. It does not ask you to constantly prove your worth. It does not require you to abandon your voice. It does not punish you for having boundaries. And most importantly, It does not ask you to become less of yourself in order to be accepted. The right people will never be threatened by your fullness. They will never require your silence to feel comfortable. They will never demand your emotional starvation for their comfort. Real love feels like safety, like respect, like balance, like truth. So the deepest boundary is this: you will no longer abandon yourself just to be loved. Because being loved while losing yourself is not love worth keeping. And choosing yourself, even if it means standing alone for a while, is still better than being surrounded by love that costs you your identity. Listen very carefully. There will come a day in your life when everything becomes quiet. Not outside, but inside. A day when the noise of people, expectations, pressure, drama, and emotional chaos finally settles. And all that is left is you. And in that moment of silence, you will look back. Not at what you owned, not at what you achieved, not at who stayed or left, but at the choices you made when your peace was under attack. And on that day you will say one of two things: I'm glad I protected my peace. Or, I wish I had protected myself more. And the difference between those two sentences is not luck. It is not destiny. It is the boundaries you choose today. Because every time you ignored your peace, you were writing tomorrow's regret. Every time you stayed where you were disrespected, you were teaching your future self what pain to normalize. Every time you silenced your emotions, you were storing tomorrow's emotional weight. But you don't see it now. Because pain is often slow, and regret is often late. So, hear this deeply. You are not just living in today. You are building the emotional reality of your future self. And that future self is either going to thank you or question you. That is why this moment matters. Not tomorrow. Not when things get worse. Not when you finally break down. But now, in this decision, in this awareness, in this turning point. Because healing does not begin when life becomes easier. Healing begins when you decide, I will no longer abandon myself to survive other people. So let this be your line in the sand. Let this be your awakening moment. Let this be the day you stop negotiating your peace for approval. The day you stop trading your emotional health for acceptance. The day you stop sacrificing your inner world just to keep outer comfort. Stand firm in this truth. Not everything deserves your access. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everything deserves your emotional presence. But your peace deserves protection. Your peace deserves respect. Your peace deserves priority. And so today you choose. Not emotionally, not temporarily, but intentionally. You choose boundaries over burnout. You choose clarity over confusion. You choose yourself over approval. You choose healing over habit. And you declare it, deep in your spirit, my mental health is non-negotiable. Not when I feel like it. Not when I remember. Not when I break down. But every single day. In every decision. In every relationship. in every space I enter, because you will not get this life again. And when it is all said and done, the greatest peace you will ever feel is not the world finally treating you better. It is realizing I finally stopped treating myself worse.